There is a plant that once clothed Roman legions, fed the starving populations of Northern Europe, and was considered a primary pharmaceutical agent for everything from arthritis to anemia. It is a plant so rich in bioavailable iron, chlorophyll, and specific lignans that its nutritional profile rivals any exotic import currently marketed at exorbitant prices. Yet, today, the moment this prolific and defiant perennial appears in our manicured lawns or industrialized fields, we treat it not as a resource, but as a contaminant, a public health nuisance targeted for immediate chemical eradication. A rejection that suggests its true utility may have been too disruptive for the modern supply chain to tolerate. Welcome to the archive of the forgotten. If these stories of suppressed potential and forgotten technologies matter to you, the best way to preserve this collective wisdom is simple. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this file with those who value genuine knowledge over convenient narrative. Our forgotten subject is the formidable Urtica dioica, a species whose scientific epithet, urtica, derives from the Latin verb urere, meaning to burn. Its historical documentation dates back millennia, but perhaps the most potent anchor is its strategic deployment by the Roman legions, who, according to lore and early botanical texts, often brought the seeds and dried plants with them into colder climates like Britain. They used a practice called urtication, flagellation with fresh nettle stems, to induce localized inflammation and powerful heat, believing this mechanical irritation enhanced circulation and offered prophylactic defense against the chronic damp and cold that plagued the camps, leveraging the very discomfort that defines the plant. The defining feature of Urtica dioica is not its leaf shape or prolific root structure, but the mechanism of defense, specialized stinging hairs known as trichomes. These are not passive spines. They are highly sophisticated hypodermic needles composed primarily of silica, which, upon mechanical pressure, break off at a weakened, bulbous base. This breakage creates a razor-sharp, angled point that penetrates the superficial stratum corneum of the skin, injecting a cocktail of chemical irritants directly into the dermal layer. This cocktail is a complex synergy of compounds, including acetylcholine, which acts as a powerful neurotransmitter, histamine, triggering the characteristic wheel and flare reaction central to local inflammatory response, and 5-hydroxytryptamine, also known as serotonin, which modulates pain transmission. The resulting localized neurosensory disruption is immediate and serves as a profound deterrent. Yet it is precisely this potent, bioactive chemical arsenal that elevates the weed into the realm of the pharmaceutical. The true conflict arises when we move beyond the superficial pain and analyze the deep phytochemistry of the leaves and, critically, the roots. Urtica dioica is an unparalleled natural source of specific phytochemicals that directly challenge established pharmaceutical verticals, particularly in urology and chronic inflammatory disease. The root extract is clinically significant due to its concentration of lipophilic compounds, including specific phytosterols and complex lignans. These lignans, particularly secoisolarisuresinol and its derivatives, possess a profound and measurable affinity for sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG, the glycoprotein responsible for transporting and regulating sex hormones, notably dihydrotestosterone, DHT. By binding competitively or non-competitively to SHBG, these nettle root components effectively limit the binding of DHT to prostatic tissue receptors. This antagonistic action is a molecular mechanism that has demonstrated clinical efficacy in managing the non-malignant symptoms of benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, a multi-billion-dollar market currently dominated by synthetic alpha-reductase inhibitors and alpha blockers. Nettle offers a viable, often less side effect-laden, alternative. The leaf extract, when correctly processed through heat or drying to denature the trichome compounds, shifts its utility entirely towards systemic anti-inflammatory action. Research indicates that specific fractions within the leaf matrix are potent inhibitors of crucial pro-inflammatory signaling pathways. Specifically, they interfere with the activation and translocation of the nuclear factor kappa B, NF-kappa B, transcription factor complex. NF-kappa B is the central molecular switch situated in the cytoplasm that, once activated by inflammatory signals, translocates to the nucleus where it dictates the expression of genes responsible for key inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-1 beta, IL-1 beta, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF-alpha. By dampening this transcription factor activity, Nettle effectively turns down the volume on the body's internal chronic inflammatory cascade, offering compelling nonsteroidal support for conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and seasonal allergic rhinitis. Furthermore, the diuretic properties of nettle, driven by high concentrations of flavonoid compounds like quercetin and rutin, provide an effective, potassium-sparing renal tonic, increasing urine output without causing electrolyte imbalance commonly associated with loop or thiazide diuretics. This combination of potent anti-inflammatory action, specific hormonal receptor antagonism, and superior nutrient density, boasting more bioavailable protein per unit weight than many commercial greens and containing high levels of readily metabolized vitamin K and carotenoids, created an economic threat. When a readily available, easily cultivated perennial weed can perform the tasks of a proprietary synthetic drug and a carefully engineered superfood supplement, the established market forces must, by necessity, redefine it not as a competitor, but as an uncontrollable liability, thus initiating the pervasive narrative of it being merely an invasive, stinging pest. This reframing allowed for the political and agricultural suppression required to maintain the economic viability of centralized chemical solutions. Yet, the history of resource management shows that nature's most persistent solutions are often deployed when human systems fail. The designation of Urtica dioica as a weed is fundamentally a luxury of industrialized stability, a label that dissolves the moment supply chains fracture or resources become rationed. Its true resilience was revealed during periods of extreme duress, most notably the two world wars. During World War I, when the German and Austrian empires faced catastrophic shortages of imported cotton fiber and essential dyes due to the Allied blockade, the nettle plants surged from the fields to the factories. German textile scientists repurposed the strong, long bast fibers, which constitute up to 10% of the dried stem mass, traditionally used in ancient linen production. These fibers, structurally comparable in length and tensile strength to hemp and flax, were subjected to a complex degumming and retting process, the separation of the fibers from the non-fibrous matrix, and were subsequently spun into functional clothing, military uniforms, and utility fabric for sacks and crucial parachute cordage. Simultaneously, the sheer nutritional density of the leaves was critical during the severe rationing that defined both global conflicts. Beyond its use as a primary vegetable substitute rich in iron and vitamin C, the nettle was processed for its concentrated chlorophyll, which was used both as a green dye and, crucially, as a medicinal restorative for blood deficiency, highlighting its ability to transition seamlessly between industrial raw material, sustenance, and medicine in a true crisis scenario. This period demonstrated that the plant's perceived uncontrollability, its ability to grow ubiquitously without cultivation inputs, was its ultimate strength, providing decentralized, immediate, and accessible biological resources precisely when proprietary systems collapsed under geopolitical pressure. The story of the stinging nettle, from Roman pharmacy to textile giant to agricultural enemy, is a profound commentary on the human desire to categorize and control that which resists domestication. We seek uniform, predictable inputs that yield predictable, quantifiable outputs, a process that necessitates the rejection of biological abundance that offers too much, too freely, and too decentralized. Urtica dioica embodies the principle of persistence. It thrives in neglected soil, requires no fertilizer, and actively deters casual harvesting, forcing a deliberate, knowledgeable interaction. It teaches us that true resource security does not lie in securing finite, centralized supplies, but in understanding and utilizing the resilient, ubiquitous resources that persist on the periphery of our controlled systems. The weeds we fight are often the very solutions we forgot we possessed, surviving the chemical onslaught and the cultural erasure, simply waiting for the moment the grid fails and we are forced, once again, to look to the untamed edges of the landscape for survival and profound health. The true threat posed by Urtica dioica is not merely its bulk nutritional density, but the sheer complexity and synergy of its secondary metabolite profile, a biological arsenal that defies simplistic categorization and challenges the reductionist model of synthetic pharmacology. Moving beyond simple vitamins and minerals, the plant's leaves and roots yield an astonishing array of therapeutically active components, including high concentrations of kaempferol and quercetin, powerful flavonoid glycosides recognized for their potent antioxidant activity and mast cell stabilization properties. Furthermore, the presence of specific phenylpropanoids, lignans such as secoisolaris-oresinol, and various triterpenes contributes to a pharmacokinetic profile that simultaneously acts on multiple inflammatory pathways. Nettle offers a cascade of low-affinity, synergistic inputs that modulate systemic inflammation rather than suppress it outright, suggesting an evolutionary optimization for physiological balance that synthetic pharmaceuticals struggle to replicate. Detailed molecular studies show that urtica extracts directly interfere with the inflammatory cascade by inhibiting the activation of nuclear factor kappa B, or NF-kappa B, a master regulator protein that controls the transcription of pro-inflammatory cytokines such as TNF-alpha and interleukin-6. This capacity to dampen inflammatory gene expression without the broad-spectrum immunosuppression characteristic of traditional corticosteroids places nettle in direct competition with emerging, highly specialized anti-inflammatory agents. The most commercially contentious aspect of the nettle's phytochemistry lies in the roots, specifically in the modulation of the endocrine system, an area dominated by multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical management. Studies on the aqueous and ethanolic root extracts consistently demonstrate profound efficacy in managing symptoms associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia, a relief largely attributed to the highly specific lignin 3,4-divinylyl tetrahydrofuran. This compound exhibits a remarkable affinity for sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG, effectively blocking the binding and subsequent action of circulating androgens, primarily dihydrotestosterone, the key hormone central to prostatic tissue proliferation. By competitively binding to SHBG, nettle extracts strategically alter the bioavailability of testosterone and DHT, offering a non-surgical, low-side-effect alternative that bypasses the need for costly synthetic 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. This direct, proven intervention in a major clinical segment, confirmed by decades of complementary medical practice and controlled trials showing significant reductions in nocturia and substantial increases in urinary flow rates, is perhaps the most potent economic motivation for its strategic relegation to agricultural pest status, justifying the suppression of a widely available clinical substitute. The existence of a ubiquitous, easily harvested botanical agent that fundamentally compromises the market share of proprietary hormonal therapies underscores the necessity of maintaining the narrative that these compounds are merely folklore and the plant itself a menace. This intrinsic biological complexity culminates in the plant's defining characteristic, the stinging trichome. Far from being a crude evolutionary defense, the trichome functions as a highly specialized, silicified hypodermic needle, a nanoscale delivery system structurally akin to a glass capillary tube maintained under turgor pressure. The fluid contained within these fragile, hollow structures is not merely an irritating cocktail of histamine, acetylcholine, and serotonin, intended only to repel herbivores. It is a complex suspension medium that, upon mechanical rupture, delivers microdoses of bioactive constituents directly into the superficial dermal layers. Traditional phytotherapy leveraged this specific interaction, known as urtication, as a recognized clinical practice for chronic rheumatism and paralytic conditions. The counter-irritation induced by the sting triggers a localized neurogenic inflammatory response which, paradoxically, leads to profound long-term systemic anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects by potentially activating endogenous opioid mechanisms and diverting peripheral cytokine activity. Thus, the plant demands a deliberate, often painful, engagement to unlock its full therapeutic potential, resisting the sterile extraction and passive consumption models preferred by industrial processing. It requires participation, not just consumption, reinforcing the foundational principle that true resource security is negotiated through knowledge and effort, not simply acquired through purchase. thereby frustrating any attempt at scalable, centralized profiteering.